My name is Ike, and I was 20 years old when my life fell apart. After grinding through finals week, all I wanted was the comfort of my childhood bedroom. Instead, the taxi dropped me at a house with a sold sign stabbed into our front lawn. My belongings sat in weather-beaten boxes on the driveway. No warning, no explanation. Just a cold voice when I called my mom, "Handle it. You're an adult now." Those words changed everything. Before I continue my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and rebuilding. I grew up in a modest 2-story home in suburban Philadelphia. Not extravagant by any means, but it was mine, or so I thought. My parents, Richard and Diane, worked as accountants at the same firm downtown. They weren't the warmest people. Hugs were rare and praise even rarer, but they provided stability. At least that's what I believed for the first 18 years of my life. As their only child, I wasn't spoiled, but I never went without necessities. My parents emphasized self-reliance early, having me do chores for my allowance and get summer jobs once I turned 16. "Money doesn't grow on trees," my father would say, while reviewing household expenses at the kitchen table, calculator in hand. Now I wonder if those lessons were less about building character and more about preparing me for their eventual abandonment. Our family home wasn't just a structure. It held 15 years of memories. The height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe. The dent in the hallway wall from the time I tried to ride my bicycle down the stairs at age 8. The oak tree in the backyard where I built a reading fort, spending countless summer afternoons lost in adventure books. That house wasn't just a building. It was the physical embodiment of my childhood. Looking back, I can see signs that my parents were emotionally withdrawing, but nothing prepared me for their final betrayal. Family dinners became increasingly silent affairs during my high school years. Questions about their day were met with one-word answers. My achievements, captain of the math team, honor roll scholarship offers were acknowledged with nods rather than celebration. But even with their emotional distance, I never imagined they'd completely sever our relationship. Getting accepted to Berkeley's engineering program was my proudest achievement. First-generation college student with a partial scholarship. My parents seemed proud during my high school graduation, even hosting a small backyard party with relatives and neighbors. Dad even made a rare toast to Ike, who's going farther than we ever did. Those words replay in my mind, now carrying a different meaning than I first understood. They'd wanted me to study business, follow their practical footsteps into accounting or finance. "Engineering is risky," Mom had said during college application season. "What if you can't find a job?" But I was drawn to building things, solving tangible problems, creating solutions. The scholarship made the decision easier to justify to them, though tension lingered beneath their reluctant support. Freshman year was challenging but incredible. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore and as a math tutor to minimize student loans. Despite the financial stress, I maintained a 3.8 GPA. Making friends came easier than in high school, fellow engineering students who shared my interests and ambitions. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Communication with my parents dwindled during that first year away. Weekly calls became monthly, then occasional texts. I attributed it to everyone adjusting to the new normal. During spring semester, calls with my mother grew strange, hurried conversations with background noises, suggesting they were moving around the house. When I asked direct questions about summer plans, she'd change the subject or cite bad reception. Dad stopped coming to the phone entirely by April. The journey home after finals week was exhausting, a 30-hour bus ride, because I couldn't afford airfare. I'd texted them my arrival time 3 days before leaving and again when I boarded the bus. No response, but that wasn't unusual given their spotty communication patterns. I figured they were busy with work, or perhaps planning a surprise welcome home dinner. The taxi driver who picked me up from the bus station seemed confused when I gave him my address. "You sure that's where you're headed, kid? Thought I saw an open house sign there last weekend." My stomach tightened, but I dismissed his comment. Perhaps a neighbor was selling. Perhaps he had the wrong house number. The moment we turned onto my street, I knew something was wrong. The familiar blue shutters of our home had been painted a sterile white. The flowering dogwood Dad had planted when we moved in had been cut down. And there it was, the sold real estate sign, garish red letters proclaiming the erasure of my past. "You want me to wait?" the driver asked as I stood frozen on the sidewalk. I nodded mechanically, unable to form words as he helped unload my duffel bags beside the stack of cardboard boxes on the driveway. Neighbors peeked through curtains, their faces showing mixtures of pity and curiosity. Mrs. Abernathy, who'd lived next door for 12 years, quickly retreated when I caught her eye. They knew. They all knew, and no one had warned me. The June heat pressed down as I examined the boxes, haphazardly packed, many unlabeled. Some had been damaged by morning dew, the cardboard softening at the corners. My entire childhood exposed to the elements and neighborhood scrutiny. I opened one to find my academic awards thrown in with bathroom towels. Another contained framed photos with cracked glass, the images of family vacations that now seemed like elaborate fictions. With trembling hands, I called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring. "Where are you?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What's happening?" "Oh, Ike." Her voice carried no warmth, no apology. "The house sold faster than we expected. We left your things for you." "Left my things? You sold our house without telling me. Where am I supposed to go?" "Handle it. You're an adult now." The words landed like slaps. "This isn't our problem. Put Dad on the phone." "He doesn't want to talk." Background noises suggested they were in a car. "Where are you?" I repeated, desperation cracking through my facade of anger. "We've moved to Florida, starting fresh." She offered no address, no invitation. "How could you do this?" My question emerged as a whisper. "Don't be dramatic. You're at college most of the year anyway." Her dismissal of 18 years of family life stunned me into silence. "We've done enough for you. Time to stand on your own 2 feet." The call ended. I stood in the driveway of strangers, surrounded by the discarded fragments of my life, utterly abandoned at 20 years old. Night was falling when the full weight of my situation hit me. The taxi driver had long since left after I assured him someone was coming to help me, the first of many lies I'd tell to mask my abandonment. The temperature dropped, bringing with it the realization that I had nowhere to sleep. No home, no bed, not even a car to curl up in. I scrolled through my phone contacts, panic rising with each name I passed. Most of my high school friends were away at their own colleges or working summer internships in other cities. The few who remained local weren't close enough friends to impose upon. After 20 minutes of increasingly desperate texts, Brandon Holler, a debate team friend I hadn't spoken to in months, responded. "Crash on my couch tonight. Figure it out tomorrow," his text read, followed by an address in North Philly. The apartment he shared with 2 roommates was a 40-minute bus ride away. I couldn't take all the boxes. The cruel calculus of my new reality forced me to sort through my possessions in fading daylight, making snap judgments about what to save and what to abandon. Yearbooks and childhood journals came with me. Winter clothes stayed behind. Summer had just begun, and I couldn't carry the bulk. My extensive book collection, carefully accumulated over years, remained in water-damaged boxes on the driveway. The chess trophy from 8th grade, the signed baseball from the Phillies game where Dad had actually seemed happy, all left behind. Brandon's ancient Honda pulled up around 9. He said little as he helped me load my bags and selected boxes into his trunk and back seat. The silence continued until we were halfway to his apartment. "Want to tell me what happened?" he asked, eyes fixed on the road. The story poured out of me in fragmented sentences. By the time we reached his building, tears streamed freely down my face, the first time I'd cried since 3rd grade, when my father said, "Boys who cry never succeed in life." Brandon awkwardly patted my shoulder as I gasped for breath between sobs in the parking lot. That first night on Brandon's lumpy couch was sleepless. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the sold sign, heard my mother's cold voice, pictured my abandoned possessions. My mind replayed every family dinner, every vacation, every conversation, searching for warning signs I'd missed. Had they been planning this for years? Was I that blind to their true feelings? The questions circled endlessly as Brandon and his roommates slept peacefully behind closed doors. Morning brought no clarity, only the harsh reality of my financial situation. My bank account held exactly $342.18, my remaining funds after textbooks and bus fare home. The summer job I'd lined up at a local engineering firm suddenly seemed impossible. It was 10 miles from my now non-existent home, and I had no transportation or housing nearby. When I checked my student finance portal, another shock awaited. The college fund my parents had started when I was born, mentioned proudly at every family gathering, had been emptied. The fall tuition payment was due in 8 weeks, and the account showed a zero balance. I'd been cut off completely. Brandon found me hyperventilating in his bathroom, curled against the tub as panic overwhelmed my system. This couldn't be happening. Parents didn't just abandon their children. Families didn't simply dissolve overnight. But mine had, and the reality was crushing me with each labored breath. "You need to talk to someone," Brandon said once I'd calmed enough to speak. "Legal aid or something. This can't be right." The shame of explaining my situation to the volunteer lawyer at the community center burned worse than the June heat. She listened patiently, making notes, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. "I'm sorry, but your parents had every legal right to sell their house," she explained. "Since you're over 18 and not on the deed, you have no ownership claim. As for your belongings—" "They can't just put them on the street," I interrupted. "Actually, they should have given you formal notice, but since you weren't a paying tenant, your rights are limited. You could sue for the value of any damaged or lost property, but that requires filing fees, evidence of value." My blank expression must have communicated my financial reality. "What about abandonment?" I asked. "Aren't parents legally required to support their children?" In Pennsylvania, parental support obligations typically end at 18, with exceptions for college and some divorce settlements. "Based on what you've described, they've behaved terribly, but not illegally." Her eyes softened. "I can connect you with some emergency housing resources." The police officer was even less sympathetic when I attempted to file a report. "Family dispute. Not a criminal matter," he said, without looking up from his computer. "Take it to civil court if you want." By day 3 of my crisis, the reality had crystallized. I was completely on my own at 20 years old. No home, dwindling funds, no family safety net, and a university expecting tuition I couldn't possibly pay. On the 4th day, I returned to my former home, sitting on the curb across the street. A young couple was moving in, carrying furniture and laughing together as they started their new chapter in my space. The woman noticed me watching and frowned, whispering to her partner. He approached cautiously. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested I should leave. "I used to live there," I said, voice hollow. "Until last week." His expression shifted slightly. "Look, we bought the house fair and square. The previous owners didn't mention any issues. Did they leave anything, boxes in the basement or attic maybe?" "Place was empty when we did the final walkthrough." He hesitated. "There was a box of papers. The realtor gave us mail and stuff that came after they left. No forwarding address." 10 minutes later, I was walking away with a small box containing cable bills, insurance offers, and a birthday card from my grandmother, postmarked 2 weeks after my parents had sold the house and disappeared. She didn't know they'd abandoned me. Nobody in the family knew. That night, by the dim light of Brandon's kitchen, I examined my remaining photos for clues. My parents' smiles seemed forced in every family portrait, their eyes never quite meeting the camera. A Thanksgiving image from 3 years prior caught my attention. My mother's hand gripped her wine glass so tightly her knuckles showed white, while my father's eyes fixed on something outside the frame. Had they been plotting even then to shed their family life like an unwanted skin? At the bottom of one carelessly packed box, I found a folder of my childhood drawings, labeled in my mother's precise handwriting, "Worthless junk." The casual cruelty staggered me. Who keeps their child's artwork for 15 years only to label it worthless? Who were these people who had raised me? By day 7 of my homelessness, Brandon's roommates had grown tired of stepping over my belongings. Their initial sympathy had worn thin, replaced with pointed comments about rent contributions and privacy. I couldn't blame them. Their tiny apartment wasn't designed for an extra resident, especially one with emotional baggage spilling out as visibly as my physical possessions. 2 more days max, Brandon told me apologetically. Dave's girlfriend is moving in this weekend, and they need the living room space. The youth shelter downtown had no openings. Summer brought an influx of teens escaping unstable homes. One intake worker suggested I try the adult homeless services, but warned they were overcrowded and potentially dangerous for someone my age. My situation was falling between the cracks of social services, too old for child welfare, too young and inexperienced for the adult homeless system. Desperation drove me to knock on Mrs. Jenkins' door. The 78-year-old widow lived 3 blocks from my former home and had hired me for lawn work throughout high school. I'd shoveled her driveway in winter, raked leaves in fall, and helped with groceries when her arthritis flared up. "I heard what happened," she said, ushering me into her kitchen without preamble. "Neighborhood's been talking. Shameful what your folks did." The garage apartment she offered wasn't much, essentially a storage room, with a bathroom that her adult son had converted before moving west years ago. No air conditioning, minimal insulation, and a twin mattress that smelled faintly of mothballs. But it had a roof, a lock on the door, and came with an arrangement yard, workhouse maintenance, and grocery runs in exchange for lodging. "Not charity," Mrs. Jenkins insisted. "Fair trade of services. I need the help, you need the roof." The garage apartment became my base as I scrambled for employment. My university summer internship hopes were replaced by desperate applications to every business within walking distance. By month's end, I was working 3 separate minimum wage jobs: overnight shelf stocker at the grocery store, weekend cashier at the gas station, and evening dishwasher at a local restaurant. 18-hour days became my norm. I'd return to the sweltering garage apartment at dawn, sleep for 4 hours in the increasing summer heat, then start again with yard work for Mrs. Jenkins before my restaurant shift began. My weight dropped from 160 pounds to 143 in 3 weeks. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. But the multiple paychecks slowly built my bank account back toward something resembling security. The hardest day came when I sold my guitar collection. 3 instruments I'd saved for since middle school, purchased with birthday money and summer job earnings. The music store owner recognized my desperation, offering half their value with practiced sympathy. I accepted without negotiation, needing the $800 to secure fall housing near campus, more than I needed the instruments that had once provided comfort. "Going to a good home," the owner assured me, as I stared at the empty guitar cases. "Some things we have to let go to move forward." My university's financial aid office was sympathetically unhelpful when I called to explain my situation. "Unusual circumstances form requires documentation," the counselor explained. "Bank statements showing withdrawal of funds, evidence of abandonment. Even then, additional aid isn't guaranteed mid-academic year." My academic advisor suggested a leave of absence, a gap year, to stabilize my finances before returning. "Your scholarship has a continuous enrollment requirement," he reminded me. "Taking time off would mean reapplying for financial aid next year with no guarantee of receiving the same package." Each conversation underscored the precariousness of my position. Without my parents' financial information on FAFSA forms, I was in bureaucratic limbo. Independent student status required extensive documentation, or being 24 years old, neither option immediately available to me. The weight of potential lost opportunity crushed harder than the immediate financial strain. I'd worked relentlessly through high school for my scholarship, outperforming wealthy peers whose parents hired tutors and test prep coaches. Now, through no fault of my own, my education teetered on collapse. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, and when exhaustion finally claimed me, nightmares followed. Recurring dreams of arriving home to find my parents changing locks, pretending not to recognize me. Waking up in cold sweats. Calling out to people who had chosen to erase me from their lives. Brandon noticed my deterioration during our increasingly rare meetings for coffee. "You look like hell," he observed one afternoon. "When was the last time you had a full night's sleep?" "Sleep is for people with security," I answered, only half joking. Trust became a foreign concept. If the 2 people genetically programmed to love me could discard me without warning, how could I trust anyone? I began assuming everyone had abandonment waiting in their back pocket: friends, employers, Mrs. Jenkins. Every kindness seemed suspect, potentially masking future betrayal. The first panic attack hit while I was washing dishes at the restaurant. A plate crashed to the floor and suddenly I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. My heart raced beyond control. The manager found me huddled beside the industrial sink, hyperventilating, convinced I was dying. "Anxiety attack," he said with the weariness of recognition. My sister gets them. Breathe into this paper bag. Slowly. The panic attacks became regular visitors, unpredictable in timing but consistent in terror. I began carrying paper bags in my pockets. When panic hit at the grocery store or walking between jobs, I'd duck into alleys or bathrooms to ride out the storm of physiological fear alone. Alcohol offered temporary numbing on my rare evenings off. Never enough to interfere with work, just sufficient to dull the edges of abandonment that cut constantly at my consciousness. 2 beers to help me sleep. A shot of whiskey to steady shaking hands before job interviews. Brandon's concerned glances went unacknowledged. You should talk to someone professional, he suggested after finding me zoned out on his couch during a rare social visit. The university has counseling services. I laughed bitterly. For students who can afford to return. July brought oppressive humidity and thunderstorms. During one particularly violent downpour, I continued working in Mrs. Jenkins' garden, replanting storm-damaged flowers while rain soaked through my clothes. The physical discomfort matched my emotional state, so I barely noticed the developing chills and cough. 3 days later, I collapsed during my grocery store shift. The fever had reached 104 degrees, pneumonia setting into lungs weakened by exhaustion and poor nutrition. The store manager called an ambulance despite my delirious protests. No insurance, I mumbled as paramedics loaded me onto a stretcher. Can't afford this. The hospital stay remains a blur of fever dreams and antibiotic IVs. Mrs. Jenkins visited daily, bringing homemade soup and worry creasing her elderly face. She'd found me unconscious in the garage apartment when I failed to show up for our usual morning coffee. Scared me half to death, she scolded, when my fever finally broke. Working yourself into the grave at 20. The real shock came with discharge papers, $8,500 for 3 days of hospital care, medication, and tests. The billing department's payment plan options assumed resources I didn't have. Each month's minimum payment exceeded my food budget. The financial counselor's expression showed she'd seen my situation hundreds of times, young adults, without safety nets falling through America's healthcare chasms. Apply for emergency Medicaid, she advised, handing me forms. It might cover retroactively. Otherwise, hospital charity care programs exist, but there's a waiting list. My credit score, previously non-existent, plummeted with the hospital bill entering collections. Daily calls from debt collectors became another layer of stress. Their scripts contained no room for my explanations, only demands for payment and thinly veiled threats of financial ruin. Medical bills forced impossible choices. The inhaler prescribed for pneumonia-weakened lungs cost $90 after discount programs equivalent to 3 days of food. I stretched meals to 1 per day, supplemented by Mrs. Jenkins' leftovers when pride allowed me to accept them. The ancient Corolla I'd purchased from a co-worker for $800, my only major expenditure since the abandonment broke down on Roosevelt Boulevard during rush hour. The repair estimate exceeded the car's value. Without transportation, my gas station job became untenable. The manager reluctantly terminated me after my 3rd late arrival via unreliable public transit. Walking 5 miles to the restaurant job in August, heat resulted in blistered feet and sweat-soaked clothes before shifts began. Customers wrinkled their noses when I served water. Refills, the physical evidence of my struggle, visible despite my best efforts to maintain appearance standards. The psychological breaking point arrived on a muggy Tuesday evening. I stood on Schuylkill River Bridge after my shift, watching water flow beneath, contemplating how easy it would be to disappear, to stop fighting, to end the constant strain of survival without support. The thoughts terrified me, but the momentary relief they promised was seductive. My phone buzzed, Brandon, checking why I'd missed our weekly coffee meeting. His text pulled me back from the edge. Dude, where are you? Getting worried. The campus therapist, Brandon, eventually convinced me to see operated on a sliding scale for community members. Dr. Harris listened to my story, without the pitying looks I'd grown accustomed to receiving. What you're experiencing is complex trauma, she explained, during our 2nd session. Your parents' abandonment triggered acute stress, but it's also activated older attachment wounds. Attachment wounds. The emotional distance you described throughout your childhood suggests a pattern of emotional neglect that predates the abandonment. Children internalize their parents' behavior as reflections of their worthiness. Your parents were emotionally unavailable long before they physically abandoned you. The diagnosis landed heavily: depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. The clinical terms gave shape to the formless dread I'd been carrying. Dr. Harris recommended medication I couldn't afford, and weekly therapy I could barely squeeze into my work schedule. But naming the monsters somehow made them marginally more manageable. Sessions revealed patterns I'd normalized: my parents' consistent, emotional absence, their criticism disguised as character building, their subtle discouragement of my friendships and interests. The abandonment wasn't a sudden personality change, but the culmination of lifelong emotional distance. They were planning this for years, I realized during one session. The college fund was their exit strategy: get me physically out of state, then disappear. Social isolation deepened as summer progressed. Brandon left for a family vacation in Maine, the casual mention of his parents paying for his flight, highlighting the gulf between our realities. Mrs. Jenkins was hospitalized for scheduled hip surgery, leaving me alone in the garage apartment, without even her morning check-ins. One Sunday afternoon, my only day without work, I sat in a public park watching families picnic and play. Children chased each other, while parents chatted on blankets, the ordinary scene of family togetherness, suddenly unbearable to witness. I walked home and deleted my parents' phone numbers from my contacts, a small symbolic gesture of accepting they were truly gone from my life. That night alone in the stifling garage apartment, I hit emotional bottom, sobbing into a pillow to muffle the sound I grieved, not just the recent abandonment, but the family connection I'd never truly had. The childhood without genuine nurturing. The conditional love that proved to be no love at all. I cried until physical exhaustion claimed me, waking the next morning with swollen eyes, but a strange emptiness where despair had previously lived. Something had shifted. I'd touched the depths of my pain, and somehow survived the contact. Rock bottom became a foundation of sorts, a place from which the only direction was up. August arrived with suffocating heat and an unexpected encounter. Working my dishwashing shift at Marconi's Italian restaurant, I was taking trash to the dumpster when a familiar voice called my name. "Ike, is that you?" Professor Harrington from my freshman engineering seminar stood in the parking lot, keys in hand. The distinguished academic looked out of place against the restaurant's faded exterior. "Professor." Embarrassment flooded me, caught in my food-stained uniform, exhaustion evident in my posture. "I thought you were interning at Patterson Engineering this summer." His brow furrowed as he took in my appearance. Something in his genuine concern broke through my carefully constructed walls. Standing beside restaurant garbage bins, I gave him the condensed version of my summer nightmare. His expression shifted from shock to anger as I explained my parents' abandonment and my fight for basic survival. "Unacceptable," he said when I finished. "Absolutely unacceptable. Not your circumstances, your potential being wasted. Have dinner with me after your shift. I have a proposition." 3 hours later, seated at the restaurant's corner table after clocking out, I listened as Professor Harrington outlined a research assistant position in his department. 20 hours weekly, $15 hourly, flexible scheduling around classes. The previous assistant graduated unexpectedly early, leaving me in a bind for fall semester. He slid a department application across the table. "Your project in my seminar showed remarkable promise. This position should cover housing and basic expenses while providing relevant experience for your degree." My throat tightened with suspicious gratitude. "Is this because of my situation?" "This is because you're qualified," he corrected firmly. "Your circumstances simply made me aware you're available." "I don't offer charity, Ike. I invest in talent." The research position became my lifeline, not just financially but psychologically. For the first time since abandonment, someone was acknowledging my value beyond basic labor. Professor Harrington saw potential where I'd begun to see only survival. Support materialized from unexpected directions. Mrs. Jenkins, recovering from her surgery, connected me with her church community. Despite not being religious myself, I found myself surrounded by practical assistance, donated professional clothes for interviews, home-cooked meals delivered during study periods, occasional rides to campus. The church's youth pastor organized a discreet fundraiser for a local student facing housing insecurity. The $2,000 raised covered my security deposit for campus-adjacent housing and textbooks for fall semester. Brandon returned from vacation with surprising news. His parents wanted to meet me. I told them what happened, he explained. They're pretty pissed on your behalf. Dad's an attorney, not the right kind for your situation, but he knows people, and they want you to spend Thanksgiving with us. The invitation to a family holiday pierced me with equal parts longing and terror. I don't need charity, I began. It's not charity to be treated like a human being, Brandon interrupted. That's just basic decency, man. Let people care about you. Mr. Williams, my former high school physics teacher, provided a reference for my apartment application when I explained landlords were hesitating without parental cosigners. His letter detailed my responsibility and character in terms that made my eyes sting when the leasing agent shared it. The University Alumni Association approved my application for an emergency grant, $2,500 toward tuition. Combined with additional loans, work study, and a payment plan, my education was precariously preserved. Each support offering challenged my newly formed belief that people inevitably abandon. Each person who showed up, who followed through on promises, created tiny fractures in the protective shell I'd built around myself. Therapy continued weekly, delving deeper into family patterns and their impact on my self-perception. Your parents' actions reflect their limitations, not your worthiness. Dr. Harris emphasized repeatedly. Their capacity to love was damaged long before you were born. The breakthrough came during a session focused on childhood memories. I described a piano recital at age 8, playing perfectly, scanning the audience afterward to find my parents' seats empty. They'd left halfway through, later explaining an important work matter had emerged. And what did 8-year-old Ike make of that? Dr. Harris asked. That I wasn't important enough to stay for. The realization surfaced naturally, that nothing I accomplished would ever be sufficient. And adult Ike. What does he understand now? That they were incapable of genuine connection. That their abandonment says everything about their emotional limitations and nothing about my worth. The words emerged with surprising conviction. Their failure to love properly doesn't make me unlovable. Journal writing became a nightly ritual, processing anger, documenting small victories, untangling complex emotions around family. The pages filled with rage, grief, confusion, and gradually emerging strength. Writing externalized the chaos, creating narrative from trauma. Boundaries crystallized in my consciousness. I would never again build my security on someone else's foundation. Never make myself small to accommodate others' comfort. Never sacrifice my well-being to earn conditional love. These weren't bitter resolutions, but essential protections, the healthy scaffolding of self-preservation. With Professor Harrington's mentorship, I created a strategic recovery plan. The University Financial Aid Office helped establish my independent student status through a dependency override appeal, a challenging process requiring extensive documentation of abandonment, but ultimately successful. A free financial literacy workshop through the university taught basics I'd never learned: emergency fund building, credit repair strategies, student loan management. Small achievable goals replaced overwhelming despair. Save $100 monthly. Make all payments on time. Apply for every relevant scholarship. New friendships formed with engineering classmates who knew nothing of my summer crisis. These relationships developed slowly, built on shared interests and genuine connection rather than circumstance or necessity. For the first time, I allowed people to know me without being defined by abandonment. Fall semester began with tentative hope. My new campus-adjacent apartment, shared with another engineering student named Tyler, provided stability I hadn't felt in months. The space was modest, but represented incredible progress from the garage apartment's sweltering confines. The research position with Professor Harrington engaged my intellect beyond basic survival for the first time since the abandonment. Working on renewable energy storage solutions, I found myself absorbed in meaningful problems, my mind stretching toward innovation rather than contracting around trauma. The flexible hours accommodated my class schedule while providing consistent income. You have a natural intuition for system integration, Professor Harrington noted during our third week working together. Have you considered specializing in sustainable energy systems? There's significant industry growth projected. His casual mentorship extended beyond the research lab. He connected me with professional organizations, encouraged conference attendance, and treated me as a colleague in training rather than an assistant. His belief in my potential gradually helped restore my own. Academic performance became my controlled environment, the space where effort reliably yielded results. I threw myself into coursework with renewed focus, maintaining a 3.9 GPA despite working 20 hours weekly. My design for a modular solar collection system earned department recognition and an invitation to present at a regional engineering conference. Your resilience is remarkable, Professor Harrington commented after my successful presentation. Many students would have collapsed under similar circumstances. Not much choice, I replied. Move forward or drown. That's where you're wrong, he countered. Many would choose drowning, figuratively speaking. You chose the harder path of rebuilding. Financial discipline became my religion. Each paycheck was allocated with mathematical precision. 70% to essentials, 20% to emergency savings, 10% to debt repayment. The emergency fund grew slowly but steadily, $200, then $500, eventually reaching $1,000. The hospital had accepted a reduced payment plan based on income documentation, the monthly amount painful but manageable. Tyler proved an ideal roommate, focused on his studies, respectful of space, and genuinely kind without being intrusive. Our apartment developed comfortable routines, shared cooking duties, at study evenings, occasional gaming breaks. His stable family background emerged in casual conversations, loving parents who called weekly, sent care packages, and genuinely supported his independence while remaining connected. My mom wants to know if you like chocolate chip cookies or oatmeal raisin, he mentioned one evening. She's sending a care package and says there's always enough to share. The simple inclusion stung with bittersweet recognition of what healthy family support looked like. Tyler never pushed for details about my family situation, accepting my vague explanations with respectful distance. But his parents' peripheral kindness, the extra cookies holiday card signed with Tyler's apartment family, occasional grocery gift cards addressed to both of us, offered glimpses of normal family connection. Therapy continued, shifting focus from crisis management to deeper healing. Dr. Harris guided me through examining childhood patterns, developing healthy relationship boundaries, and building genuine self-worth independent of external validation. You're developing secure attachment with yourself, she noted during our 6th month working together. Learning to be your own stable base. The support group for family estrangement she'd recommended met bi-weekly in a community center conference room, 8 to 12 participants sharing similar yet unique stories of family fracture. Some had chosen estrangement for self-protection. Others, like me, had been discarded. Ages ranged from 19 to 70. 3, a sobering reminder that family wounds transcended generational boundaries. The hardest part is holidays shared. Monica, a 50-something nurse estranged from her adult children. Society expects family togetherness, and explaining absence opens wounds every time. For me, it's the lack of history keeper, added David, 36, abandoned by parents in his teens. No one remembers your childhood stories, your first steps, your early personality. That shared history just vanishes. These sessions normalized my experience, while connecting me with others who truly understood the particular grief of family severance. We celebrated small victories together, getting through birthdays without breakdown, establishing new traditions, finding chosen family connections. Slowly, carefully, I developed new relationships. Melissa from my advanced materials class became a study partner, then friend, eventually something more. Our connection developed with deliberate slowness, my trust issues necessitating patience she graciously provided. I'm not going anywhere, she assured me, after I finally shared my full abandonment story. But I understand why that's hard to believe. Actions matter more than words. Her consistency proved more healing than any verbal reassurance could. She showed up when promised, communicated clearly about expectations and boundaries, respected my need for independence while offering genuine connection. The relationship developed on foundations of mutual respect rather than desperate attachment. 18 months after my parents' abandonment came the unexpected contact. A text message from my mother's number appeared one Tuesday afternoon during class. "Ike, we should talk. Things weren't handled well. I'm sorry for that. Call when you can." The message's casual tone, as if addressing a minor disagreement rather than total abandonment, left me breathless with anger. No acknowledgement of the devastation caused, no recognition of the struggle to survive. Just things weren't handled well, the understatement revealing how fundamentally disconnected she remained from the reality of her actions. I didn't respond, but the contact opened floodgates. Voicemails accumulated, first from my mother, then my father. 27 missed calls in 3 days. Text messages escalating in urgency. Emails with subject lines growing increasingly desperate. "Important family matter" to "emergency, please respond." My father's voicemail claimed a medical emergency, without specifying details, a transparent manipulation attempt. My maternal grandmother called next, clearly recruited as an intermediary. "Your parents are trying to reach you, dear. They've been very worried. Whatever happened between you family should come first." The irony of her statement might have been amusing if it weren't so painful. Family first, except when that family sold their home without warning their son, left his belongings in the driveway, and disappeared for nearly 2 years. Brandon's father, the attorney who'd become a supportive figure in my life, offered perspective over dinner at their home. "You don't owe them response or forgiveness," he said simply. "Any reconciliation happens on your terms, not theirs. Their sudden urgency doesn't create obligation on your part." Professor Harrington similarly advised, "Consider what serves your well-being, not their need for absolution. Healthy boundaries may include no contact, limited contact, or contact with strict conditions. The choice belongs entirely to you." For 2 weeks, I let their messages accumulate unanswered while processing with my therapist. Their timing coincided suspiciously with my junior year parent-student weekend, an event I'd already decided to attend solo rather than burden chosen family figures with obligation. "What do you actually want?" Dr. Harris asked during a focused session. Setting aside obligation, guilt, and family expectations, what outcome serves your healing? The answer crystallized gradually. I wanted understanding without expectation of forgiveness. I wanted acknowledgement without being pressured to resume a relationship. I wanted to face them as an independent adult who had survived their betrayal, neither defined by their abandonment nor willing to pretend it hadn't happened. The coffee shop near campus provided neutral territory, public enough for safety, private enough for difficult conversation. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with clear sight lines to exit a habit formed through months of hypervigilance. My parents entered together at precisely 2 o'clock. 2 years had visibly aged them, my father's hair now completely silver, my mother's face lined beyond her 49 years. They scanned the room with anxious expressions until spotting me, relief flooding their features in identical waves. "Ike." My mother moved toward me, arms extended for an embrace I didn't reciprocate. Her arms dropped awkwardly as she registered my rigid posture. "You look good, healthy." "Let's sit," I suggested, gesturing to the chairs across from me. They complied with uncharacteristic obedience. Decades of parental authority suddenly evaporated in the face of my calm control. My father fidgeted with his wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood discussions of household finances. My mother clutched her purse with white knuckles. "You had something to discuss," I prompted, when they remained silent. They exchanged glances, a married couple's wordless communication I'd witnessed throughout childhood. My father cleared his throat. "We owe you an explanation," he began. "What happened? It wasn't planned the way it unfolded." The story emerged in halting fragments pieced together between defensive justifications and sideways admissions. Financial trouble had begun years earlier, my father's gambling addiction, concealed from both his family and accounting partners, investment losses, second mortgages, credit card debt accumulated in secret, my mother's complicity in hiding financial reality while debts mounted. When the accounting firm discovered discrepancies, everything collapsed, my father explained. We faced potential criminal charges, certainly civil liability. The house sale was part of bankruptcy proceedings. We panicked, my mother added. The Florida move was recommended by our attorney distance from creditors while restructuring finances. And informing me didn't fit your escape plan. I kept my voice deliberately level. We were ashamed. My father's admission seemed genuine, his eyes fixed on the table. We'd failed at everything, finances, careers, parenting. It seemed kinder to make a clean break than drag you into our mess. Kinder. I repeated the word with careful neutrality. You thought abandonment was kindness. My mother's eyes welled with tears, the emotional display that once would have immediately triggered my caretaking response. Now I observed her distress with detached curiosity. We've been trying to contact you for months, she said. Your grandparents told us you're doing well in school. We're so proud. You've forfeited any right to pride in my accomplishments. I interrupted, the first edge entering my tone. Those belong exclusively to me and the people who actually supported me. The conversation continued for 90 minutes, their explanations, justifications, and eventual apologies flowing around me like water around stone. They'd stabilized financially through bankruptcy protection, re-established modest careers at a small firm in Tampa, reconnected with extended family who'd been told I was focusing on studies rather than abandoned. We want to be part of your life again, my father finally stated. We know we don't deserve it, but we're asking for another chance. Their expectation was clear, that natural family bonds would overcome betrayal, that blood connection would triumph over their actions, that my forgiveness would be automatic healing, immediate reconciliation assumed. Here's what I can offer, I said after considering their request. I'm willing to have limited occasional contact phone calls, perhaps holiday gatherings eventually. But any relationship moving forward will be built from scratch with clear boundaries and expectations. Trust is earned, not guaranteed. I'll need time and consistent evidence of changed behavior before considering any meaningful reconnection. Their faces registered shocked disappointment. They'd expected immediate reconciliation, not conditional terms. My continued independence clearly wasn't the script they'd imagined. We're still your parents, my mother ventured. Biologically, yes. In every functional sense, no. You surrendered that role 2 years ago. Any future relationship will be as adult acquaintances with shared history, not parent and dependent child. The meeting ended with tentative agreements. They would respect my boundaries, communicate only through email, initially make no financial offers or demands. I made no promises of forgiveness or emotional availability. The weighted expectation of family obligation had lifted. I owed them nothing, and that knowledge was profoundly liberating. Walking back to my apartment afterward, I felt lighter than I had in 2 years. Confronting them had confirmed what therapy had been teaching me all along. Their actions reflected their limitations, not my worth. They were flawed humans who'd failed spectacularly at parenting, but their failure didn't diminish my value or potential. 2 months after our meeting, I graduated with honors, a full semester early through summer credits and heavy course loads. The engineering department's recognition of my senior project led to job offers from 3 renewable energy companies. I accepted a position with Centera Solutions in Denver, a fresh start in a new city with competitive salary and benefits. Professor Harrington attended my small graduation celebration, bringing department colleagues and a framed letter of recommendation that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. The most impressive quality you've demonstrated isn't academic brilliance, though you possess that in abundance, he'd written. It's your extraordinary resilience and ethical grounding in the face of circumstances that would have defeated most people. Any organization would be fortunate to have not just your technical skills, but your demonstrated character. By my 24th birthday, I had achieved what once seemed impossible: genuine financial security, independent of anyone else's support. My emergency fund had grown to 6 months of living expenses. Retirement contributions had begun. Student loans entered manageable repayment. My credit score had recovered through consistent on-time payments and responsible financial management. The apartment I purchased in Denver was modest, a 1-bedroom condominium in a developing neighborhood, but it represented everything I'd fought for: stability, security, and a home entirely my own. The closing documents listed only my name, sole owner of my space and future. No one could sell it without my consent, or leave me standing in its driveway surrounded by discarded belongings. Melissa and I maintained our relationship through the move, navigating long-distance challenges, until her graduate program finished, and she joined me in Colorado. Our connection had deepened through honest communication and consistent reliability, building blocks, absent from my family of origin, but foundational to healthy attachment. The healing journey continues daily. Abandonment wounds don't disappear entirely, but become manageable with proper care. Therapy taught me to recognize triggering situations, communicate needs clearly, and distinguish between past trauma responses and present reality. Hypervigilance softened into appropriate caution. Isolation transformed into selective vulnerability with proven safe people. My relationship with my biological parents remains limited and conditional. Occasional emails, brief phone calls on major holidays. Their consistent respect for my boundaries has allowed marginal trust to develop, though nothing approaching conventional parent-child closeness. This arrangement, formal, distant, carefully managed, serves my well-being better than either complete estrangement or false reconciliation. The true family that emerged from crisis bears no genetic connection to me. Brandon's parents, who welcome me for Thanksgiving each year, Professor Harrington's continued mentorship, Mrs. Jenkins, who still sends birthday cards with pressed flowers from her garden, Melissa, whose love never demands diminishment of self, Tyler and engineering colleagues who became true friends, the estrangement support group members who understand the particular grief of family severance. These connections, chosen, nurtured, authentic, provide richer support than obligation-based relationships ever could. They've taught me that family is defined by consistent care and mutual respect, not shared DNA or legal documents. For others facing similar abandonment, I offer the hard-won wisdom of experience. Healing is possible. The path is neither short nor straight, but forward movement happens with consistent effort and appropriate support. The crisis that seems like ending often becomes painful beginning. The people who leave create space for those who choose to stay. The family you build through conscious connection outshines the accidental arrangement of birth. Most importantly, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I've forgiven my parents for my own peace, releasing the corrosive anger that once threatened to consume me. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences or automatically restore relationship. It simply frees me from carrying their failures as my identity. 2 years after abandonment, 98 panic calls later, I stand firmly in self-created security, not despite their actions, but because their actions forced me to discover strength I might otherwise never have found. The wound became transformative passage, painful, unnecessary, but ultimately navigated through resilience I didn't know I possessed. Have you ever experienced unexpected abandonment by someone you trusted? How did you rebuild afterward? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life journeys through difficult times. Remember that your greatest challenges often reveal your hidden strengths. Thank you for listening, and remember, family is what you build, not just what you're born into.